Hi everybody and welcome to Motorcycle Day 2024. This year we're featuring Norton and Ducati, and behind me we've got a GP3 bike from 2003, and that will be starting up shortly, and you'll see that no doubt. But before we do that, I just wanted to go around some of the Nortons through the ages. Over here we have a 1926-27 Model 18 record-breaking bike, original bike, and then here from the similar era, the famous LPD1, again a record-breaking bike that rode here at Brooklands and set records at Montlhéry in France, getting in the way of the camera here. And on to the side of that we've got a Norton International, and this is from, got to check the things now, 1936. So this again is a racing bike from that era, and so we've gone through the ages. If we now then go back to this Manx Norton here, it's an experimental bike from the 60s-ish, and if the camera just comes down to look at the carburettor, under there is an inverted carburettor, which is part of an injection system, hence all the fuel lines and things, which it's incredibly difficult to start up. It's got no fuel pump, and so it's you have to do everything in not the right order, I should say. But anyway, that's the Soames Norton. The interesting thing about that is that the engines were used to power Formula 3 cars, and that's why it was used as an experiment for the cars rather than bikes. Now, what Norton did is that they wouldn't sell engines on their own, so people had to buy the whole bikes, and these Manx Norton featherbed frames were very cheap at the time, but very good. So there were lots of surplus frames. The engines were being used in the Formula 3 cars, and they were on the market, and what people were doing was buying them up and sticking a Triumph engine, which you could buy off the shelf, and hence the Triton was born. And next we'll go and have a look at a Triton. Like my namesake Martin Brundle here, but right over the other side of the site we're coming up to a Triton, which I've just been talking to you about. This is a Norton frame with a Triumph engine, and this is Steve, who doesn't know I'm going to ask him questions. But would you like to tell us a bit about your Triton?
Yeah, okay, see you later. Hi Martin. So I built this from bits. I started about 25 years ago with the frame, the seat, a couple of wheel hubs and the lower half of the engine. And then the rest of it I built over the subsequent 7 or 8 years. Bits from eBay, bits from Kempton Park, bits from Ardingly, bits from all over the place really. And then it's been a game of fettling and tuning ever since. So I've owned it now for about 25 years, and it still gives me a lot of pleasure.
Great, thanks for that, Steve. And so we see it's a Norton frame, Triumph engine, Triton. Back here in the race area, and we've got 2 John Player Nortons and some other racing bikes, and I think we're just going to start up the Ducati, and we'll talk about the Desmo Norton after the Ducati's run. Okay, so just over by the clubhouse here we've got 2 military motorcycles, typical World War II motorcycles. From our interest of the Norton story is this Norton. It's a film bike, we should say. It wasn't originally a war bike, but it is the right model. and then there's a matchless on the other side there. So after that, there's so many Nortons around, I can't even begin to tell you a bit about that one, but that's a Bitzer made up of bits, bit of a sort of grass track racer back in the day. Next in the race paddock we have the 500 Desmodromic Norton. Interesting because it's pretty much unique, and we'll talk to the owner or the person who built it rather, and it's got a similar configuration engine at the top ends to the Ducati that has recently been run. This was the last version of the bike built by Doug Hill. It was never raced because the Norton Works closed down, so this was the end of an era. So if we go over to Michael, who built the bike, and ask him to tell us a bit about it. So where did it come from, Michael?
Well, it's John Surtees who acquired all the parts from various sources, I think, but they were genuine parts out of the Norton factory. The bicycle itself is a 1954 works one, but Doug Hill rebuilt the engine with much stronger crankcase, stronger crank, a different conrod, and then of course a different cylinder head, which has got desmodromic valve operation. The idea was that would enable them to rev the engine much harder. They didn't actually try it above the normal 7,000, but it's supposedly able to go up to 10,000.
Okay. So just for the viewers, we'll just explain a bit about what desmodromic is. As I understand it, it's a gear system which avoids using springs for the valves, which with the metallurgy was not that good. So yeah, tell us a bit about that.
Yes, desmodromic it's not a new thing, but basically there are two cams, one to open a valve and one to close it, without the use of springs. And in a Manx Norton, that's a big advantage, that you can't see the springs, and it doesn't chuck oil out. But in terms of operation, it can operate quicker at higher revs. As I say, it hasn't been revved above the normal, but it is capable of it.
Okay, and have you ridden it?
I don't think I have, actually. Probably not.
He's got such a choice of bikes, he can't even remember whether he's ridden it or not. So, thanks, Michael. Michael looks after the Surtees collection, and this, as I say, was a very special bike. So, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So again, wandering around trying to keep out of the rain, I come across an organisation which I know very well, the Norton Club, who are good supporters of Brooklands events, etc. And I have with me
David Cooper. I'm the secretary of the Surrey branch of the Norton Club, and we meet once a month at the Stepping Stones Inn near Dorking on the third Tuesday of the month. Third Tuesday of the month? Thursday of the month, yes. We have about 30 odd members, regular members, and quite a few others we see occasionally. And we've all got Nortons in the plural.
That's surprising.
Many of them.
That's surprising.
Many of them in the plural. They tend to be addictive. So there's quite a lot who got one, but there's several who got two or three, and occasionally four. But of course they're the world's best road holder then, and perhaps not now, but not far off.
A little bit of interest in a way. I have a 1972 Yamaha TR3 race bike, and when you read the literature from it, the frame is a copy of the featherbed frame, and the Japanese call it the comfort frame.
Comfort frame. Well, I actually have a featherbed frame Norton. I also have a rigid frame Norton, the pre-war one. And when you ride that at high speed around the roads, you really know it. And if you don't stand up in the foot pegs, you regret it. And when you get onto the featherbed frame Dominator, it really is like a featherbed. Nowadays, people say, "Oh, they're a bit hard." Well, they really don't know what hard means. But there are quite a few of us who got rigid pre-war bikes, and they have their own joy. Actually, they actually handle very, very well. They're remarkably stable, unless you hit something very, very big in the middle of a corner when they get more exciting. But being a Norton, they always recover.
The interesting thing is that Norton's success really in the 50s and 60s, when you look back on it, wasn't the engine, it was actually the frame that made it rideable. And the Italians came along with the 4-cylinder, more powerful engines, and they needed Duke to go and work for them to make the frames and the handling to the same level as the Norton.
Well, that's right. The Norton was still using an engine that was derived from. There's a bike over there which is a 1932 engine, the single overhead camshaft engine. There's another one. There's another one over here in 1935, and there's one at the far end which was mid 50s, and it's essentially the same engine. There's very, very little change visibly. There are a few bits, but lots and lots of fiddling around with it. But
interestingly enough, I have a 1968 250 Ducati, which is over there, and the hemispherical head on that is an advance on the original 1930 Norton overhead cam and the hemispherical head that goes with it.
Yeah, I think Ducati carried on using the overhead bevel drive for overhead for the overhead camshaft. And I think they still do today, as far as I'm aware. They don't today, do they? Oh, they've given up now, have they?
If you, I'm giving a talk on the evolution of the Ducati from the 60s onwards.
Yeah.
After we run the MotoGP bike upstairs in the Napier room, which I'll fill you in on the evolution of it.
I fear we might have the odd Ducati owner amongst our branch, although we try and avoid conversations about foreign machinery.
Well, I think the other thing, we're just thinking about it, I saw Ray Am win the 55 or 56 TT on the Probiscus Norton, where he beat Duke on the Gilera.
Yeah, well, the Norton, as you say, it was the handling. Although, in fact, McCandless, who designed it, not only improved the handling, he also improved the engine quite remarkably. He never got any credit for it because Joe Cray took all the credit for absolutely everything. But simple things like a rubber suspended float chamber for the carburettor to reduce, what do they call it? Frothing, that's the word, yes. Prior to that. And in fact, even today, I was riding down the road, hit a rough patch, and suddenly there was a slight stutter. I thought, I don't know what that was. And I'm sure it was frothing in the carburettor.
Absolutely.
And they just didn't notice that
until
the 1960s.
Now that it's rained, we can come outside and see a bit more of the machinery rather than getting wet. So we have here...
Well, the first one here, this is a Model 18 from 1929. And this essentially was the last of the race bikes with the standard overhead valve engine. They decided that they could control the valve profile, the valve movements better with overhead camshafts. So they built the next bike along, which is a 1932 Norton International. Before anybody criticises me, there are quite a few later modifications, but essentially it's the first of the overhead cam engines. Moving up the line, we move on now post-war. This is 1956. This is a particularly smart example of I can't remember the actual date of this one, of a race bike, owned by a racer, not a race bike. This is a domestic bike owned by Paul Smart. And it's a Norton Dominator with twin carburettors and all the good go faster bits from the right at the end of the 1950s, before they changed to a more modern cylinder head. When we jump right on to the 1970s with a large Norton Commando. There are still family resemblances, and the engine, for example, of this is very, very similar to the Dominator twin which precedes it. The next one is really a calf racer type. It's got all the go faster goodies. They're not necessarily ever used a track bike. It might have been, but it's got all the go faster bits of the 60s. And the final one in the row is it's actually a 350cc, but it's very similar to the famous ES2. This is a Model 50, and it's the classical overhead valve post-war single the sort of thing that was died out eventually at the end of the 60s and was finally superseded when everybody wanted multiple cylinders. But there's a lot to be said for a single. Easy to maintain, easy to work on, reliable, go on forever, and cheap to run and cheap to insure, and good fun, and handling extremely well.
Thanks. What else have we got further up here?
This is an example of the fashion of the time. In the early 60s, people wanted bikes. Cars were coming in much more. The Mini had arrived, and motorcycle sales weren't so good. Get Bob out of the way. And the idea was to enclose them, because people wanted to be more civilised. Keep your young lady or your wife or whoever she was, your girlfriend, keep her legs clean. Of course, they came and keep her skirt clean, but then, of course, they came along with a mini skirt, so keeping the skirt clean wasn't quite as important, I guess. It didn't really catch on. The next one is another example of a 1930s rigid Norton. This is a 350cc, smaller engine, not as powerful as a 500. A lot of people like them, though, because they rev better, so they might not be quite so fast on hills, but they're probably more comfortable on a fast, flat road.
I think there is an opinion that 350cc is the ideal motorcycle size of engine for general use.
I think it was always considered to be the right one back in the day, and then everybody was gone as performance increased. People, things like the 750 Commando here, twice the engine size, much more complicated. Owners love them. I don't actually own one. I won't say anything rude about them, but it's too complicated for my personal taste. But that's purely a personal taste. They are actually the high spot of the British motorcycle industry, I think you could argue at the time. The engine was stretched, and they won races hand over fist until the mid-1970s. And they were still about the fastest thing on the road. They won the Bike of the Year 4 times in a row, didn't they? Even after the Honda 750 had arrived in England and really put the writing on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
The final one is owned by one of our Norton specialists. He's probably one of the top Norton restoration gurus, which is why his is about the only Norton on the line, certainly Norton single, that's got no oil leaks, that goes like a dream, and it's an overhead camshaft race engine, so it's really a Manx racer, but it's equipped in this case with a sidecar. There is in fact a road test report pinned up here from the Motorcycle magazine in the 1930s showing that they did ride these things with sidecars, although people always assumed they were always used as solos. But if you were a moderately prosperous chap who might have had a Lagonda in the garage for the family, he had a Norton International for fun, just as the fast boys do today.
Yeah.
And for the same reason.
Thanks very much for that history of Norton, if I can call it that. It's good to see real input from people who know what they're talking about.
Thank you.
So having had the history lesson of Norton with the Norton Owners Club, we're coming right up to date, and we have very privileged actually, because not many Norton dealerships around at present. So and we've got
Paul from South Downs Motorcycles, based in Petersfield.
And you are the local Norton dealer?
Yeah, so we're one of 13 that are currently in the country, but we are a sole Norton dealership. I think there's 3 sole Norton dealerships. You've got one in Scotland, one in Yorkshire, and then ourselves down south. The rest are sort of multi-franchise.
Norton is such a powerful brand, which has really gone through difficult times after its demise as the Manx Norton and what we've seen. So now you're reincarnated with a new range of bikes. That's, maybe you could take us through the bikes that you've got here.
Yeah, so we've got 2 Commandos on display at the moment. So you've got the Cafe Racer, which has obviously got the clip-on handlebars, and then you've got the Sport model with the more sort of upright riding position. They're a 961cc parallel twin. Öhlins front and rear suspension, so that's fully adjustable as well. Exhaust note sounds really nice. Yeah, and then you've got the other 2, which are the V4s. So the V4, they're a 1200cc engine, 186 horsepower. Again, full Öhlins front and rear, fully adjustable, full aluminium chassis, carbon fibre bodywork, and titanium race exhaust.
What angle V?
V4.
Yeah, but a V4 what?
Yeah, about that.
Okay. They have different characteristics.
They do. And then you've got the V4CR. So again, it shares the same as the SV, but it's more of the cafe racer look. So you don't get the nose cone with it, but again, it's exactly the same. Slightly shorter back end on it. Wheel span is exactly the same, but just different styling.
So how many years would I have to save up to own one of these wonderful machines?
Not many at all if you want to take finance. No, so the V4s, they start at, well, the CR starts at 42, the SV starts at 45, the Commando starts at 17.
So a little bit of hard work and saving then, eh?
It is, but you know, you're getting a hand-built motorcycle. So I went to the factory a couple of weekends ago, and there wasn't a robotic, conveyor belt in sight. It's all built by hand. Everything's hand polished and handmade. So, you know, for 45 grand, you're getting a lot of motorcycle, even down to the Commandos. You know, at 17 grand.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming, and I wish you success because over the years, I've seen many Nortons, and it's nice to see them back on the. I was going to say on the street, but you really mean on the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got it right this time. So yeah, I think we're in for a nice surprise.